most of you know Don. He's been a member of our board of directors since we started the Denver Society of Creation. But I'll tell you a little bit more about him tonight. He's a senior process development engineer at Gates Corporation. He's been with Gates for 28 years and is a mechanical engineer who holds 13 granted patents. Don enjoys working on breakthrough products that no one else in the industry has marketed. He's developed products such as crimp fittings for large IV pressure oil rig hoses and hose connectors such as the innovative Gates iLock. Don received both a BS and an MS in mechanical engineering from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. He's had a passion for creation apologetics for most of his adult life and attended the CTI Creation Apologetics Teachers College in 2017 and 2018. He lives in Castle Rock with his wife of 35 years. He's a father of 4 and a member of Epiphany Lutheran in Castle Rock. Don?
So can you hear me okay with this? Is this good volume? All right, great.
Can everybody see the screen okay? Is it bright enough? Can you dim the lights a little more?
Yeah.
Dim them a little more?
Dim them a little bit.
Oops, a little too much?
All right, very good. So it's great to be here tonight. Great to have this opportunity. Like Judy said, I attended this Creation Apologetics Teachers College, and I kind of want to learn how to teach on this stuff. So hopefully this will go all right. And anytime during the presentation, hopefully I'll be able to see your hands. But feel free to raise your hand, and we can discuss anything or answer any questions as we go along. So today's talk on biomimicry. Engineers investigate great designs in God's creation and seek to copy them. And I'm an engineer. I've designed a lot of things. Coming up with the best design for a given purpose doesn't come by accident. It's challenging work, and things work together in such a way that one part really has no function unless all these other parts are involved. And design is done purposefully with the end goal in mind when choosing materials, components, and how they're assembled. So if things were designed by an all-knowing, all-powerful creator, we would expect to find them to be incredibly well designed. And we do. So let's define biomimicry. Biomimetrics, or biomimicry, is the imitation of models, systems, and elements of nature for the purpose of solving complex human problems. The terms biomimetrics and biomimicry derive from ancient Greek, bios being life, and mimesis being imitation. So I'm sure you've all heard that Velcro was inspired by birds that get stuck in animals and socks and what have you. And you've probably heard of like the low drag swimsuits that they call shark skin swimsuits. That's basically all this is. We look at nature and we find the benefits of some design that's out there, and we use it. Researching for this presentation was kind of heartbreaking for me because people would say the stupidest things. I mean, things that bother me, I guess I should say. They'd say, there's so much we can learn from millions of years of evolution. They talked about how designs in nature being suboptimal. Human bipedalism is bad because we're not fast runners. What kind of nonsense is that? Any engineer knows that you design things for a purpose. Now, imagine if I tried to tell you I could design this car that was the best at everything. It was the best car at everything. It had the fastest acceleration, the highest top speed, the quietest interior, the most comfortable suspension, the highest safety rating, and the most maneuverability while consuming the least energy and being the best at off-roading. Come on, no! You design for the application, and that's what God does. So, we have a theme verse here, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Now, if nature were designed by the random evolutionary process, we would expect to find a myriad of examples of poor design in nature. What we really find are creatures that are well optimized to perform specific functions, along with great beauty and variety. And this would be what we would expect from a God who created everything very good. So the first example I'm going to go through is aircraft. The problem is controlled flight. It took us quite a while to figure out, quite a few centuries and millennia to figure out how to make a flying vehicle. So, unlike ground vehicles where if you control yaw, left, right, with the steering wheel, you're pretty much good. An aircraft requires pitch and roll control, and unlike ground vehicles where speed is not a major issue, concern, but aircraft, they could readily stall if they go too slowly. And there's no contact with anything solid. So it's easier to lose control, such as when a plane goes into a spin. So first, let's give credit where credit's due for flight, right?
Okay,
I know all.
There's a screen here.
Projector will automatically shut down. Yeah, it's doing that.
It's because we've got the AV turned off.
Oh, and it'll raise the screen.
Yeah, I think
That'll be fun.
I think it's okay now, but I'll just
Okay. All right. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. So, first let's take a look at God's incredible design. So, a feather's design with its barbs, barbules, and hooks is incredibly lightweight and strong. So, you can see these little bubbles I put on here. So, the stem of the feathers, that's what, kind of goes up the middle of the feather, right? And then it has barbs coming off the side of that stem. And then off the side of each barb come barbules. And the barbules are pretty interesting in that, like, if you look at like the top barb there, the bottom barbules coming off of it are plain. They have no special features. If you look at the barbules coming off the bottom barb, they have these hooks that are evenly spaced. And they're spaced just right so that they can hook on to the barbules from the upper barb, coming down from the upper barb. So it locks in place. They all lock together in this beautiful, lightweight, strong, sophisticated structure. Okay, now I heard things like, okay, birds evolved from reptiles. Okay, there was like these frayed scales, right? And that was a benefit for like catching bugs or something. And then eventually that gradually changed into feathers. Okay, first of all, a scale is like a fold in the skin, and a feather comes out of a follicle like a hair, and it grows into this incredibly sophisticated and detailed structure. How did these, scales turn into feathers? I mean, it's just nonsense. It's just total nonsense. Birds grow and lose feathers symmetrically, so that keeps them balanced. Can you imagine if they were kind of random? It loses a bunch of feathers on one side, and then whoa, having a lot of trouble flying, right? But they don't have to worry about it. It's all automatic. God made it all work just right, no problem, right? And birds have muscle control over each individual feather. Imagine just the control to be able to do all this. It's just amazing. So it changes, you know, we kind of know this with planes, but changes in wing shape and angle of attack. So, you know, the shape of the wing, they can kind of change what they do with the feathers and everything, and also angle of attack. That, you know, that's like how steep it's going into the wind and stuff. They allow for these precision landings without premature stalling. Now think about this, what a bird can do. Take your little drone and fly it up there and see if you can land on the top of a lamppost. Or see if you can land on a wire or a tiny branch. We don't hold a candle to God's control systems. You know, it's just an amazing thing what's in there. And all these are just highlights. I mean, they only scratch the surface. I mean, talk about very good design. And you know, this doesn't even consider the bird's bones, ligaments, respiratory system, eyesight, programming, navigation abilities, all this stuff that has to come together in this creature to be able to do this stuff. You could spend years studying any one of these aspects of a bird and still not figure out how to fully duplicate it. So observation of birds, that kind of led us to flight. So the Wright brothers spent a lot of time studying birds. Birds, you know, as I mentioned, reshape their wings when turning, landing, or adjusting to changes in wind currents. You notice that. We saw that the tail feathers of the bird also adjust to changing conditions, and like when they're banking, the tail feathers do special things to keep the bird from going into a spin and stuff. And of course, the shape of a bird's wing creates the lift as the air moves around it, and so it takes advantage of that, especially these soaring birds. They'll fly into the wind and be able to just rise up and stuff. So those are some of the observations that we had with birds. So let's look at man's cheap imitation. So why do I say cheap imitation? Well, you know, we can fly faster and farther than birds now, right? You know, we got these jet planes that tear across and go from one place to another really fast, right? Well, I already mentioned their precision landings. You know, how about efficiency, beauty, and grace? I read about frigate birds. They can fly over the ocean for 2 months straight without stopping, and even like sleep while flying or turn off parts of their brain. It's like, wow. And there's also a bird that's been documented to fly longer than that. Anybody know what it is?
Albatross?
Hummingbird.
Well, you guys have good guesses, but you were thinking alpine swift, weren't you? Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yes, alpine swift. So that's been documented to fly up to 6 months straight without stopping. Don't we have an awesome guy? I mean, wow.
What kind of bird is that?
Swift.
Swift, yeah. Alpine swift, yeah. So we make a rudder to control yaw. You can see that in the right picture on the bottom. It's circled in red, and that controls yaws in left, right. We have ailerons to control roll, and you can see that in the top left picture, and also in the picture on the right, circled in magenta or whatever. And elevators to control pitch, you know, nose up, nose down, and you can see that in the bottom left in the right picture, circled in yellow. And then we also have flaps to reduce the stall speed. So when you're landing, you can go slow enough to land in the, you know, not have to take a super long runway, right? And not have to stall and crash to the ground. So. And like birds, all these controls change the shape of the plane to adjust for various conditions. So we learned from birds, and we were able to do that. So, so we talked about like the efficiency of birds. That kind of leads a little bit to our next example of fins. We have a problem with low efficiency on some things. And first, again, give credit, glory to God here. Oh Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom, you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the sea, great and wide, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things, both small and great. So let's look at one of these creatures, God's incredible design for the humpback whale. So they weigh around 80,000 pounds. That's about 6 elephants. They're very strong swimmers, and you get their weight out of the water. And I think I read somewhere that the force to do that would be like the force to jack up a 747 jet plane. I mean, it's a lot of force. Interestingly, they eat a ton and a half a day in the Arctic regions during the summer. And then they fast for 8 months during migration and mating. And where do they migrate to for mating? The tropics. And they breed there. And they may swim like 16,000 miles a year. Wow, that is amazing. The agility of these huge marine creatures is a marvel. Their swimming is graceful, beautiful, and very efficient. People love watching these. Whale watchers, they'll go out and see them, come up and crash down and wave their tail and everything else. It's just really fun. Their control systems, the intelligence for swimming, singing, hunting, more things that are loving and amazing God programmed into them. Other tidbits include a 440-pound heart. Wow. 20-minute long songs that can be heard 20 miles away. And a slap from a tail fin that's strong enough to kill an attacking orca. And all of them have a unique belly print. All of them are different. So that's part of God's incredible design here. So what did we observe? So obviously we found that they're very efficient swimmers. For years, no one knew why they had those funny shaped fins. Wind tunnel tests done by the U.S. Naval Academy showed that a fin with tubercles on the leading edge created 8% more lift, 32% less drag, and allowed a 40% greater angle of attack before stalling than did a smooth one. So we're making all our planes smooth. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that, right? Although, they are changing how they make planes. But at any rate, that's pretty amazing. And so is anybody, I'm talking about tubercles. Anybody know what the tubercle is? What I'm talking about when I say tubercle?
Bump.
Yes! Yes, the bumps on the leading edge of the fin. So, I'm going to show you a little illustration here that I found online. So imagine this to be like a fin, right? And you're kind of on the left, you're kind of seeing that top view, and on the right, you're seeing kind of an edge view. And so the tubercles, they break up the flow of fluid, whether it's liquid or gas, and force it into the fluted valleys in between. And this generates vortices. You can see the little skinny things there. Vortices going along the fin. And somehow that keeps the flow attached to the top of the fin, or top of the flipper. And it increases lift, and it resists stalling. So it's pretty wild. So let's look a little at man's cheap imitations. So, benefits of this discovery are only beginning to be realized. Some probable applications include airplane wings, propellers, helicopter rotors, ship rudders, wind turbine blades, and cooling fans. And I have seen pictures online of people have made like ceiling fans with this on it. I've seen like blower fans with this feature. What you're seeing on that top right picture is a wind turbine where people utilize this concept. But to me, isn't it amazing? This is over 100 years after man's first controlled powered flight. And here we observe the design of a massive sea creature, and it may help us navigate air and water more efficiently. Isn't it just like God to continue overwhelming us with His glory during our arrogant technological age? We think we know so much, and we're so little. We don't know anything. It's cool though. It's cool that there's so much to learn, and it's really cool that God created us to be able to figure some of these things out. It's awesome. So, another example, micro air vehicles. So the problem, improving lift and efficiency. Humpback whales aren't the only creatures that take advantage of vortices. Any guesses as to what creatures can't really function without them? Insects. Yes! Awesome. Flying insects. Yep. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Now, granted, this is a little out of context, but we can learn a lot more than diligence and hard work from the ant and other insects. So let's look at God's incredible design. So leading edge vortices created by wing flapping provide extra lift. I think it's something along the lines of the vortex created by like one flap will create this eddy that is used, the energy from that is used by the next wing flap to provide extra lift. It's something along those lines, but I look at this diagram here and I don't really fully understand it. I didn't like read the paper that is associated with it. So, but regardless, the leading edge vortices create extra lift. That's what I do know. I'm not an aerospace engineer. And flying insects use this thing called optic flow to navigate, and they can detect very, very small movements. So optic flow. You're driving down the highway in your car and you look out the side of your car and everything's moving by you really quickly, right? Well, that's basically how the insect sees. They detect motion. They know how far they're going, how fast they're going, how far they're going by seeing things pass by them. The other cool thing about optic flow, and I think they're going to try to implement that in some of their control systems for micro air vehicles. Have you ever heard the kind of play on words? I wondered why the baseball was getting bigger. And it hit me. But that's basically it. You as things get closer, there's like this optic flow. So imagine, this bug is, like a bee flying up to the flower. As it gets closer to the flower, things are moving faster in its field of view. So if it's flying by optic flow, it'll naturally slow down. That's really cool. And so, what we do with our things, with so many sensors and all these different things that we look at to try to control all this, and gyros and everything else, it's like we could learn something from this. It's kind of cool. I think the optic flow is genius. So the dragonfly, which is, I'll get into this a little bit more because this is what they analyze as a dragonfly. Its four wings are controlled independently. The dragonfly can control its flight so precisely that it can look invisible to insect prey it's following. Remember optic flow? The insect doesn't really see stuff unless it's kind of moving, really. I mean, it sees motion. It's kind of its thing. So here's this mosquito, innocent little mosquito flying along, and you got this dragonfly just flying right with it. and it doesn't see it until it gets eaten.
Wow.
Anyway, pretty amazing stuff. So, observation of dragonflies. So it's using high-speed photography. Professor Stuart Burgess and his students studied the motion of a particular kind of dragonfly, the wings of it, and what they found was, the wings were close to flat on the downstroke, and they did this quick flip, and were closer to vertical on the upstroke, and then the flip again, just da, 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 and then 40 times a second. So that's quite an engineering challenge, duplicating a motion like that. But they tried. But yeah, so the flap angle was like 80 degrees, and the twist angle was 40 degrees. So pretty cool. But let's look at man's cheap imitation, or at least the one that Stuart Burgess and his team did. So they created a model. This was about the wingspan. You got a Sharpie here. It's about the weight too. That's about how heavy it was. And it had a really sophisticated set of linkages that duplicated the wing motion that they saw in the dragonflies. If you're an engineer, you're probably, especially a mechanical engineer, you're probably familiar with 4-bar linkages. Well, they did kind of this, for the engineers in the group. They did this like 2 sets of 4-bar linkages that were out of phase from each other with different like linkage lengths and stuff. And somehow, after lots of trial and error and working around doing different analyses, they managed to basically duplicate that motion with this set of linkages. Huge engineering challenge. And for the driving mechanism there, they had to fit hundreds of parts into something the size of a golf ball. And some of the nuts were smaller than a pinhead. So quite the challenge to figure out how to assemble. But they did wind tunnel tests with their design, and they found out, yes, they were able to create leading edge vortices that were similar to insects, and it did create extra lift. And they were able to run the thing at about 10 flaps per second, which is pretty darn good. But then they tried to increase it to about 1/3 of the speed of the dragonfly, and they failed the drive mechanism. So that's what we've been able to, or they were able to do so far. But I have seen a lot of cool things made. I mean, somebody came up with this gull, and it was able to duplicate some of the motion of a gull, and had all these control systems on it. It kind of looks like a gull flying. Pretty amazing. I also saw one somebody did that, I don't know if you're familiar with how a hummingbird flies, but it does kind of a figure 8 on its strokes, flopping back, going back and forth, so it can, obviously go forward, backward, up and down, and everything. But somebody was able to actually make something that flies kind of like a hummingbird. I saw him in a video online, flying into a building and stuff. But, can you imagine, though, being able to send like a micro air vehicle out for search and rescue, or for reconnaissance or something? Imagine the small spaces it could get in to find things. That'd be pretty sweet if you can do it. And God gave us incredible intelligence, didn't He? I mean, we're able to figure stuff like this out. It's pretty good. God is pretty amazing. Okay, another example, robots. So, navigating difficult terrain. So, wheels have disadvantages in that it's difficult to overcome obstacles with them. They're best on relatively smooth roads or paths. However, people and animals can overcome some pretty significant obstacles without even thinking about it. We just do it. And so the challenge is to create robots and control the motion of their limbs successfully. So balance and stride is pretty sophisticated challenges for engineers to overcome in robotics. I don't know if you ever heard about that. There was this Mars rover, and it had been, exploring Mars for years and stuff, and then it got into some sand, nasty sand, and dug its way in and became useless because it couldn't find its way out. It just kept getting deeper and deeper and couldn't get its way out. Well, there's other ways of moving. Like we can study creatures of the desert and try to figure out, okay, how do they deal with sand, and try to duplicate some of their things. So there's lots out there to learn, but I'm going to focus on just a couple things. I gotta use this verse. But ask the beasts, and they will teach you. The birds of the heavens, and they will tell you. Or the bushes of the earth, and they will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? So this is a good verse for an engineer, but also I really do think everybody does know. Everybody does know that the hand of the Lord has done this. Just looking at creation, you know there's a creator. Unfortunately, a lot of people suppress this truth, basically pretending not to know this. They don't want to be accountable to the God who made them. And, that's human nature, right? We want to do our own thing. We want to be our own boss, right? But it's sad because we have a Savior, right? And we have a God who loves us. Anyway, moving on. So let's look at some of God's, something about God's incredible designs here in nature. There's amazing beauty and variety in nature. There's creatures that support tremendous weight. Others use their flexible spines to accelerate and run very fast. Some can dig through sand and dirt with outstanding efficiency. Now I know this sounds like engineering terms. Via sensors, detection algorithms, and response mechanisms, creatures can adapt to their environment. I highly recommend all of you to come next month for Randy Galuza, Dr. Randy Galuza. So he's a medical doctor and an engineer, and he's expert in this subject. He despises the term natural selection. Nature, the environment, has no intelligence to select anything. God programmed into creatures the ability to adapt based on what they sense in their environment. And God puts sensors in the creatures, and the creatures, they figure out, not knowingly, it's automatically. but programs run. Genes get switched on and off. Different things happen. In fact, genes can even get switched on and off in the parent, and it can be reflected in their offspring to be better suited to the environmental conditions that their parents saw. Wow, this is mind-boggling, right?
Would you repeat that again, please?
The parent can experience an environment and have children that are better suited to be in the environment that the parent experienced.
Oh, okay.
There's all, yeah.
Are you talking about while the young that exist or before they exist?
Before they exist. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's all these sensors, all these programs that are running inside us. We're just scratching the surface of epigenetics. Molecules change shape and get read differently. And, it's mind-boggling. We had a Dr. Anderson. He was saying, I don't think I even know. He was a microbiologist. I don't think I even know what a gene is anymore. He said, because it's just so amazingly complex. I remember him saying, imagine an encyclopedia on one piece of paper, but the type isn't small. You fold it this way, and it reads. You fold it this other way, and it reads. You fold it this other way, and it reads. you know, all that information's there somehow. It's like, it's mind-blowing. But can you imagine the fact that humans were created in God's image so that we can actually figure that stuff out? Wow. So, like, I'm sure you've heard of, like, Darwin, or maybe Darwin's finches. You know, he talks about, you know, the variety and the different beak sizes and stuff like that. You know, depending on what food's available and whether they're in a drought and all that stuff. Well, all that turns out to be, there is actually no new genetic information there. It's just a different expression of the genes that are there with things getting turned on and off and what have you. And they can revert right back, you know, just go back and forth depending on the situation. So, yeah, I guess that's probably too much already on that. I'm probably getting bored with all that. I'm an engineer, it turns me on. So observations of animal motion. Four-legged animals use different forms of locomotion depending on whether they're walking, running, or jumping. Animals often take advantage of energy stored in tendons and ligaments from the previous stride. Looks like we might have a problem here. So this actually happens also with us. Our Achilles tendons and the arches in our foot, we kind of spring back. But you know, like kangaroos and ostriches, they take big advantage of that and get a lot of bounce back energy. I think horses do too. Probably more animals than I know. And they recover quickly from slipping or being pushed. And again, as I mentioned, they're equipped with many sensors to interface with their environment. So man has had some success in copying the motion of animal limbs. Dog and mule-like robots have been made to help carry heavy loads over rough terrain and recover from being knocked off balance. And a robot with cheetah-like motion has been clocked on a treadmill to 28 miles per hour. So that's pretty dang impressive, right? And some robots can even automatically jump over obstacles in their path. That takes a lot of sensors and sophisticated programming in real life. But in the imaginary world of evolution, these irreducibly complex systems can just pop into place after enough mistakes are made in the genes. What do I mean by irreducibly complex? Well, it's like, you know, you got a system that requires a lot of little elements in order to function. Any one of those being gone, it won't function at all. It has no purpose at all. So the fact that there's so many myriads of those things in real life and in nature, that's not something that evolution would have predicted. Because everything was supposed to be little small changes, each having a little bit of an advantage. You know, but they just pop into, they just happen to happen. It's frustrating. It's frustrating that so many people buy into that. Another example, bullet trains. So in Japan, their bullet trains go through tunnels. And a major problem is that pressure waves build up because they're moving so fast. Pressure waves build up in the tunnel, and when the train exits the tunnel, there's like this shotgun-like sound that occurs, you know, like thunder kind of thing. It can be heard a quarter mile away, and that's kind of a problem. Disturbs sleep and so forth. And so it's kind of a different. I don't know what to say. You know, like it's a different impedance. It's an impedance change going from in the tunnel to outside of the tunnel. You got all this space and low pressure air, and then the higher pressure coming ahead of that train and stuff. And I'm going to take a little side thing here, just because I had fun with this. So first of all, let's give God the credit, right? So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So, see that picture? Did you know that squid were using jet propulsion to fly through the air long before we figured it out? So how did that squid know to form its tentacles into that shape to create a wing to control its flight? How did it know to inhale and shoot out a stream of water at just the right moment to propel itself out of the water and fly, often in formation with other squid? And how did it know that it could get around faster that way? Stuff like that doesn't just happen to happen. It's sophisticated design. So let's look at God's incredible design for kingfishers. Kingfishers dive into the water for fish with virtually no splash. So isn't that quite the impedance change going from air to water? Right? And they're able to hover until they find a target and then dive in with amazing precision. The water is hardly disturbed and virtually no sound is made. And observations of kingfishers, obviously, as I mentioned, they dive into the water, hardly making a sound. And that is much like a train coming out of a tunnel. There's a big impedance change from air to water that would normally cause noise. So Bullet train chief engineer and avid bird watcher, Eiji Nakatsu, asked himself, is there something in nature that travels quickly and smoothly between two very different mediums? And he thought of the kingfisher. And he redesigned the nose of the bullet train to match. Well, what was the result? Man's cheap imitation. The change in the nose to the train to mimic the kingfisher's beak drastically reduced noise. The trains used 15% less electricity, even while they were traveling 10% faster. I imagine you could probably guess which was the original and which were modified. Another example, passive cooling. Now, people use this like in electronics and stuff, but I'm going to talk about buildings. So that was an air disturbance issue with the trains. Well, now let's use air to our advantage, natural airflow, and see what we can learn there. There's a lot of energy required to cool a building. And I like this verse, Genesis 8:22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Now, I mention this for two reasons. One, we'll always have that, so we're going to need to cool our buildings. But the other thing is, we have this promise from God. He said he'll never again send a flood to destroy all flesh. And he says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. We have all these people running around just fearful that we're going to destroy the planet. God will not let that happen. He promised us. Now, even so, he's made us stewards, right? He gave us dominion, right? We're called to care for it. So we should seek to reduce energy consumption and waste. So let's look at God's incredible design for termites. So in places where temperatures swing from 0 to 40 C's, that's 32 to 104 F, termites can keep their dwelling at a constant 30 C. Wow. That's pretty amazing. So we can look to this. They're constantly opening and closing thousands of vents around the mound. They use evaporative cooling and energy storage. So evaporative cooling, that's like what happens when you sweat, the swamp coolers and stuff like that. And energy storage, like there's materials that have a lot of heat capacity that they take a while to heat up and to cool back down again. And that tends to keep things at a constant temperature. So the termites do use all that. And they also shape their mounds in a special way to take advantage of the sun and shade to heat or cool throughout the day. So like well, it's cool in the morning. They have the big broad side of their mound pointed towards the sun, and it heats it up in the morning. And then when it's baking hot in the middle of the day, this tall, skinny mound is not getting so much sun. So they take advantage of even the shape of it. So, man's cheap imitation. So Eastgate's center building in Harare, Zimbabwe is modeled after the way termites build their homes with vents that automatically circulate air. And it's said to use only 10% of the energy that other buildings take. So you can see the blue here and the red, that represents different temperature air. So they have fans blowing in the bottom of the building, going up through it, and there's hollow floors, and at each floor, this cool air is going through and out to vents near the window. The windows are good kind of glass, and also they have vegetation. You can see on the picture that there's different things growing on the side of the building, and so then the warm air towards the ceiling goes out and up the center and out the roof, and this is just kind of this natural circulation then, where it's blocked off and going up, it goes through the floor, and then a different system takes it out the roof. So it's pretty incredible design there. And then of course the mass of the building's concrete stores the energy, and so it adds stability to the temperature, and it can either cool or heat the air coming in. And there's other buildings that use this concept, or a similar concept to this too. There's something called Council House 2 building in Melbourne, Australia, that also has this. Pretty cool. Another example, adhesive. So, problems, contamination with adhesives, you gotta have this clean surface, and then some adhesives work on this material and not on that, and all this. So, let's look at nature for this. So, I like this verse, declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols. The Lord made the heavens. So, observations of geckos. So gecko feet can stick to about any surface. They can even run upside down on polished glass. They can hang from a ceiling from a single toe, yet they easily stick and unstick each foot with ease while they're running. And their feet are self-cleaning, and they readily move from being in the dirt to needing to clean on surfaces. So it's really amazing. There's a bunch. I'm going to mention in the next slide something called setae on the bottom of its foot, but all its toes there. But if it used all, the average sized gecko would have like 6.5 million setae on it. And if it were to stick all those at once, I understand that in theory it would hold 290 pounds. So pretty amazing. God's incredible design. So there are millions of setae on their feet, and each one splits into 1,000 spatulae, which are each about 0.2 micrometers across. So if you think of a millimeter, that's a fifth of a thousandth of a millimeter. Very, very tiny, right? These little setae. 0.2 millionths of a meter. So if you look at these images from left to right, like I think there's a little green circle on one of the feet in the upper right picture, And so that's kind of showing, the bottom left, or increasing magnification from left to right on the bottom there. And so the left image shows all these different setae that are on the bottom of there. And then the middle picture, that's kind of in the blue outline, is zooming up on just a single setae, or seta. And then you can see a little tiny red box way at the end of that seta, hopefully. And that's zoomed in, and it shows how that end of the seta breaks up into this like roughly 1,000 spatulae. So it's like all kinds of these tiny little hairs everywhere. So the spatulae, they form van der Waals bonds to individual molecules. Now, I'm not a chemist, but I can tell you a little bit. It's something that if molecules get close enough together, that they'll be attracted by that van der Waals. They have to be very close together. And it has to do with polarization of molecules. You have a molecule being more positive on one side, more negative on the other, and of course positive and negative attract. So that's what the van der Waals forces are. But normally that's something that you talk about in chemistry and boiling points, and I don't know, different things like that. But yeah, this is actually using the van der Waals force to be able to cling. And it's also interesting with on the gecko, each seta acts like a spring and works with the curling and uncurling of the gecko's toes to readily attach and detach. So it changes the angle of the thing so it'll release, and the spring helps it pop. And so it just easily, without even thinking about it, just runs, even though it has a very strong ability to stick. So, let's see. Yeah, that's about it for that slide. So managed cheap imitation. So engineers were able to create thousands of tiny little things that kind of mimic what happens on the gecko's foot. And Tate created in this way, made a very strong bond. There was like 28 pounds in just a square inch, and it was self-cleaning tape. And it could, the surfaces didn't need to be as perfectly clean and what have you. But unlike it wasn't able to do this nice little spring-loaded thing that the gecko can do, right? So it could be attached and detached a few times, but after that, the line structure was destroyed and they couldn't use it anymore. But interestingly, this guy that discovered the van der Waals thing, his name's Keller Autumn. He's a biomechanics professor at Lewis and Clark College in Portland. And he was quoted as saying, "Adhesive nanostructures are such a different way of sticking things together that I don't think engineers would have invented this if the geckos hadn't done it first." Okay, I have a little problem with that statement. How smart is the gecko?
Talks on TV all the time.
Okay, you got me there.
Says it hard.
God did it first. It wasn't the gecko that did it. Okay. And the concept's also been used for bandages. In fact, some MIT guys came up with this special bandage thing, and they actually use it for internal injuries and can dissolve over time, so you don't have to take it off after a while. So, summary. Oh, sorry, it's too bright. So these examples just scratch the surface. There's so many of what we've learned and will continue to learn from God's creative genius. And the idea that these stunningly great designs, which far exceed human capabilities, could happen through millions of years of mistakes in our genes is ludicrous. Let's give God the glory for what he has done. I'm going to give you a final verse here. You have been born by me from before your birth, carried from the womb. Even to your old age I am he, and to gray hairs I will carry you. I have made, and I will bear, and I will carry, and will save. We have a God who knew us before we were born, who made us, bears us, carries us, and saves us from our sin. Let us give him thanks and praise for who he is and what he has done for us. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you've enjoyed this peek into God's glory through his creation. It's amazing, not only what's out there in creation, but that he has given us the intelligence to start figuring these things out. And to me, it's a privilege to be an engineer who has the opportunity, as Johann Kepler once said, think God's thoughts after him. And that's what we're doing with biomimicry. We think God's thoughts after him. Recommended resources. There's this book, I don't know that we have this on our book table, but I really like this one. It's by Jonathan Sarfati. Came out quite a few years ago, but it's a wonderful, gives all kinds of wonderful examples of design in nature. It's a great book. Hallmarks of Design, I've read this one. This is really, really good. It's by Stuart Burgess. Inspiration for Creation, Stuart Burgess and Dominic Statham. This is also a great book, and both of these are on our book table, as well as Discovery of Design, which I'm confident is an excellent book, although I haven't read it. And just, I'm sure a lot of you guys are creationists anyway, but if you want to just learn a little bit more creationism stuff, I just love Creation Magazine. That's been around for a very, very long time. No advertisements, they don't do that. So all of it is content. Answers Magazine is also excellent. It's got a lot more ads, but a lot of great content, just wonderful. I think it's coming out 6 times a year now. And Acts and Facts from ICR. So this comes from Answers in Genesis, Answers Magazine. Creation Magazine comes from Creation Ministries International. And Acts and Facts comes from Institute for Creation Research. Acts and Facts is where I read all those articles by the guy that's going to be here next month, Randy Galuza. I gotta see him. He's going to be awesome. So that's all. Any questions?
You want to talk about this DVD?
Oh, yeah. And there's also the DVD. So you see that there's like the book that I held up, but also the DVD for inspiration from creation. He has, I love the quote when Stuart Burgess is talking on this one. He mentions how what's his name? The atheist Dawkins. Richard Dawkins. He talks about how poorly designed the eye is, and stupid things like that. And of course, anybody who knows how the eye works knows that it's incredibly well designed. But anyway, one thing he says, Richard Dawkins has never designed anything. He hasn't even designed so much as a door handle. And if he did, I wouldn't trust it. I love that quote. Anyway, so that's on here if you want to get that. Any questions?
I was going to comment. You brought up the gecko. It brought up some memories for me. A few years ago, I was down in the jungle, the Amazon jungle. It was a mission house, and there was a mama and her 2 daughters in this one bedroom. A friend of mine named Keith, we were in our own bedrooms. Pretty soon we heard this horrible scream coming from the lady's room. Come up, come up. Yeah, so I went up there with a flashlight. Oh, there was a gecko hanging on the ceiling, and they had seen this thing. And so what to do? Well, we got to be the guys at the house, we got to chase the gecko, right? Well, we finally chased it and got its tail. The tail came right off, and the gecko kept right on going. And the tail, it just sat there
Hopped around.
and, we go around on the floor. We're saying, and us idiots, we're just sat there laughing like crazy, and the girls, they're just going nuts, you know. This is horrible.
Yeah, it's like a horror movie, right?
It turns out, the loss of that tail is another one of the gecko's designed,
Yeah.
that when something chases it, grabs it by the tail, and it just misses it, and he grows another one, you know. So, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But the geckos did some good things around the house, because in the jungle you have lots of bugs.
Yeah.
And so, they ate a lot of the bugs and kind of did a lot of house cleaning. We learned the hard way, don't leave an apple or something like that laying out. Don't munch on it, you know, it's like a mouse will.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Dan.
Just another observation about God's wonderful design. Think about what would happen to God's earth if we didn't have evaporation and precipitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would have no life.
Evelyn was sick that day.
There's one of God's miracles.
Yes.